The evolutionary history, modern biology, and understanding of anatomy within humans is a complicated concept. A story riddled with rewrites and misconceptions to be corrected to an alternate understanding, only to be reconceptualized once again. So with all these muddled responses, the archaeological and historical findings here are crucial to developing the modern understanding of our very own species. Sometimes glancing into the past gives us a window to the future, aiding in understanding ancestry and evolution down to our very bones. These have practical applications to medicine and modern advancements. So today, we'll be taking a look at biological and archaeological advancements in our understandings of humans. Pacific Islanders appear to be carrying the DNA of an unknown human species. For centuries, archaeologists, biologists, and interested followers of science have held the belief that there are two ancient species of human relatives, though recent findings appear to counter this widely spread assumption. In the South Pacific region, northeast of Australia, the DNA analysis of the population Melanesians has been found to contain traces of a human species outside of the binary we currently know of. This third, now seemingly extinct human species has never been seen before. The assumptions of Neanderthal Adenosovan being the only ancient species was derived from fossil records, though now, despite a distinct lack of fossils indicating this, we have found a third, unknown, ancient, presumably extinct human strain of DNA within a living modern society. How has this species evaded our research for so many years? This research comes as a result of new technology, allowing us to complete genetic modeling with greater accuracy. Though this does not make the new data any less baffling. A statistical geneticist working at and representing the University of Texas, Ryan Bolander, stated, "We're missing a population or we're misunderstanding something about the relationships." He offered an alternative solution to the narrative. Most are explaining that perhaps this is not a new species, but rather resembles a misinterpretation or flaws in the data we currently have. Either way, this is groundbreaking and entirely revolutionizes the understanding of our own biology, history, development, and evolutionary line. Bolander had headed up the team as lead researcher. He and his team have been looking for the percentages of this previously unseen branch of human DNA. This research into the exact percentages of homin DNA has revealed anomalies and variations that suggest there is something more than a mere mixture of Neanderthal and Denisovans at play here. It appears we have a missing part to this puzzle. At the moment, we understand that somewhere between 100,000 and 60,000 years ago, the ancestors to the modern human race migrated out of Africa and moved towards the European and Asian mainland, where the first contact was made between these two hominid species and communities. The impacts of this association linger still today, with the vast majority of European and Asian people having traceable genetic variations distinctive to the Eurasian Neanderthals within the modern society's lives. But some more recent advancements upon this established research came in 2016, with the understanding that people who are European of whom have European ancestors and therefore genetic traits and genomes that reflect those of the Neanderthals, have been found to have correlations with increased risks of depression, cardiovascular illnesses such as heart attacks, and numerous skin disorders. Furthermore, a separate study saw that what we now know as HPV was existent in these species, spread through intimate contact. The issues encountered within the possible discovery of a third human species comes through in the limited understanding of the species we already know of. Whilst we have established the existence and presence of both Neanderthals and Denisovan species, we have masses of documentation for Neanderthals, meaning our understanding is relatively advanced and there is wide representation within our fossil records. Denisovans, on the other hand, we have very little evidence for, varying sparingly only to a single long finger bone and a few teeth. These were found within a cave in Siberia in 2008. The confusing results of the 2016 study show a far more complicated map of human history, much less isolated and far more intertwined than we had ever imagined. Computer modeling predicts modern Europeans and Chinese people hold a 2.8% quantity of Neanderthal DNA. This is concordant with the pre-existing research, which ranged between 1.5 and 4% for all European and Asian peoples. These lines became far more blurred when conducting an analysis of Denisovan DNA. There appears to be no hint, trace, or slightest appearance of Denisovan DNA in any European populations today, with a little over 0.1% trace within Chinese people's DNA. The Denisovan DNA for Melanesian populations, according to Bolander, does not align with the data previously collected. The new research team says the quantity of Denisovan DNA present is closer to 1.11%, not the 3 to 6% previously hypothesized. This is one indication of a third hominid group involved in reproduction. There appeared to be similarities but distinct variations away from Denisovan DNA, presenting the idea of a previously unstudied third unknown identified group of hominids. The ideal outcome next would be to stumble across some fossils that confirm these suggestions. These findings are yet to undergo academic formality processes, such as peer-reviewed processes, meaning these suggestions may still fall under criticism, rendering them inconclusive. One possible complication is that we simply do not know enough about Denisovan DNA, as we have merely a single finger bone and a few teeth from which to draw these conclusions. This web is becoming more tangled with new research being found, both in support and contradiction. Regardless as to the conclusions drawn, this remains the sole most comprehensive research into indigenous Australian groups, considering societies more than 50,000 years old. Whether the idea of a third hominid is dismissed or we find supporting evidence, these modern discoveries and research have told us just how complex our human history is and how remarkable that of all possible variations and combinations, centuries, even millenniums of reproduction have accumulated to form today's humans. The 7 human footprints are likely the oldest evidence of Homo sapiens on the Arabian Peninsula. The autumn of 2020 saw a remarkable archaeological discovery that gave us a glimpse into the lives of ancient humans, where we traveled and possible actions taken within daily routines. There were preserved human footprints found in Saudi Arabia's Nef-or Desert, where a lake once Saturday but only for a brief interaction over 100,000 years ago. There has been an analysis of the rock around this area, concluding that the sediment dates to being between 112,000 and 121,000 years old. If this dating is in fact accurate, then this makes these 7 human footprints the oldest evidence that we know of to support the presence of early Homo sapiens on the Arabian Peninsula. Biologist Matthew Stewart, affiliated with the Max Planck Institute for Chemical Ecology in Jena, Germany, and colleagues, explained that the ancient Homo sapiens were more than likely employing the site, referred to as Alathar, as a watering hole. Further explanations explain this is a likely spot to gather food due to neighboring grasslands. However, many do not think that this was a regular visit, as the research conducted upon the sediment indicated the lake had been shrinking, like many in the region in this time. Furthermore, very few hunting tools and animal bones being present implies a short-term visit too. Similar sites have found 107 camel footprints and 43 elephant footprints, though none of these carry as much scientific weight and potential for new studies as the human footprints found. New ancient human species bones uncovered in the Philippines. In the Philippines in 2019, human fossils were revealed within a cave on Luzon, a large island in the Philippines. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of these human fossils is the possibility that these early humans may have adapted to climb trees, illustrated through the curves found within finger and toe bones. This species has been considered to be distinct from Homo sapiens, acquiring the Homo luzonensis. We are currently acting under the assumption that this ancient species lived 50,000 to 80,000 years ago alongside the Neanderthals and the Denisovans. Dartmouth College Homo foot bone expert Jeremy De Silva explains that this discovery mirrors the discovery of Homo floresiensis, nicknamed a hobbit found within Indonesia. He stated, "1 is interesting, 2 is a pattern." His response suggests that we may be drawing close to potential breakthroughs in the field. A team way back in 2007 found a metatarsal. The discovery of this foot bone, also in Luzon, alongside the more recent findings, are indicative of a species that is definitely a member of the same genus as modern-day humans. The team also stumbled across 2 teeth, 2 finger bones, 2 toe bones, and a femur. Are that these belong to 3 separate people? Some experts remain skeptical, suggesting that more evidence is needed before we begin drawing concrete conclusions. Many are concerned as to the condition of DNA after all this time, as humid conditions can cause the deterioration of DNA rather rapidly, leading to a lack of validity in data. Whether this is a new ancient species related to modern humans, or an expansion of a separate species within our genus, these bones are promising to the future of paleontological and archaeological research. Our history as humans is a jigsaw that we are still finding the pieces for, but with each new discovery we get a little closer to finding out just where we came from. What do you make of these interesting discoveries? Do superheroes only exist in movies? One look at the Avengers and you might be thinking, it's a shame that superheroes and superpowers only exist in the cinematic world. Or do they? As the age-old saying goes, not all superheroes wear capes, and today's video proves that to be the very truth. Sometimes, it's a time of adversity that unleashes the superpowers within us. So today we'll be taking a look at 4 incredible individuals who gained superpowers. Donna McNamee and Abigail Sicelo lift a car off of a boy. Donna McNamee and Abigail Sicelo are 2 women that share 2 things in common. They lived in the same neighborhood, and both are mothers. Perhaps some may say that being a mother is a superpower within itself, but there would be something else in the summer of 2009 that neither of them would expect that would bring out their superpowers within them. It was an average June day, and Sicelo's son Jaden was enjoying a game of playing with water guns with his pal and neighbor Bailey Fowler. That game would turn unexpectedly sour when young Fowler ran across the road and was hit by a car in the process. Upon hearing screams from the boy, both women rushed to his immediate aid. Upon reaching the scene, they realized that the boy was stuck under the car. Realizing there was no time to waste, the women knew there was one thing that needed to be done. Lift the 1.1-ton car up to free this boy. Neither of the women had been training for such a heavy feat, but they didn't let that fact faze them. They knew that this was an emergency with little time to act, and the time to act was in that moment without any delay. So they mustered up a strength that they didn't even know they harnessed, and the pair successfully lifted the car off of the boy. This was a defining moment that most likely saved his life. Derek Amato, a sudden musical genius. On one faithful summer day in 2006, Derek Amato did what many of us would do when we see a swimming pool. He jumped in. However, he didn't know that this very moment would change his life forever. The dive resulted in a traumatic head injury that left him with a concussion. But a concussion was not the only thing that he obtained from the injury that day. The injury gave him something that no one would expect. Not even Amato himself. He acquired a gift. A gift in the form of a set of exquisite skills, the mastery of music. Unbeknown to himself, that was the very moment where Amato would become a musical genius. Prior to hitting his head, Amato had not exhibited any musical finesse. He actually considered himself to be on the average end of the spectrum, as he puts in his own words. The same could not be said, however, after returning from hospital. He rested for 5 days. On the 5th, he ventured past the piano, which lived in his house as decoration. He decided to hit a few random notes for the fun of it. Nothing more. But as it turns out, a lot more would come from those so-called random notes. To his surprise, Amato played out a melody, something he'd never done before. Each note he struck against the keyboard with his fingertips came out precisely in tune with the notes that preceded it. If a composer with a background and expert familiarity in music was around in those initial moments, they would have instantly guessed that Amato had delved years into studying and practicing music based on the professional level of piano playing he was showing, which was certainly not the case. It all just seemingly came to him without any prior experience. Medical professionals have a term for this kind of scenario. In other words, they seemingly become sudden geniuses in a span of time that seems like it's been overnight. Amato's sudden musical ability was the product of an acquired savant syndrome, a rare condition where someone who suffers an injury acquires some extraordinary set of skills they didn't have prior to their injury. Whereas he once considered himself to be average, he now was the envy of composers and musicians who spent and dedicated years upon years to attain a sliver of the skill that Amato was now displaying. A musician may call what occurred to Amato a dream come true. However, Amato is quick to correct anyone that may be yearning for a similar occurrence. As extraordinary as the gift is, it's not a blessing without a curse. Ever since the dive on that otherwise uneventful summer day in 2006, Amato lost 35% of his hearing, experienced some memory loss, and has suffered from light and audio sensitivity, loss of consciousness, and excruciatingly painful headaches. He describes the headaches as being so debilitating in pain at times, it feels too overwhelming to bear. As Amato puts into his own words, "I always thought there's nothing in this world that can make you feel like you do not want to be on this earth. Sometimes the headaches are so bad I'm almost begging to just not even be alive to deal with it. It's a humbling reminder that nobody really knows what another person may be going through behind the scenes based on their outward presentations to the world. Edward Muybridge. Another example of this same syndrome is in the case of an individual known as Edward Muybridge. He was born as Edward Muggeridge, but later changed his name in an effort to tie back to and reclaim and identify with his Anglo-Saxon origins. Rewinding back to the days of black and white photographs in the year of 1860, Muybridge alongside other passengers suffered a stagecoach accident. The accident resulted in one fatality while leaving the remainders of the passengers injured. Muybridge happened to be amongst one of the so-called lucky ones that survived, but he suffered a head injury as a result of the trauma from the accident. Prior, he owned and ran a successful bookstore with some superficial plans to incorporate photography in the future. The photography plans had never yet come into fruition, nor were they ever solidified. However, after the accident, Muybridge seemed to take on a particular fascination for all things that involved capturing moments in time and motion via photographs. The sudden onset and spark of interest in photography, and not to mention his excelling and precision with it, are very reasons as to why researchers look at Muybridge as an example of someone who experienced acquired savant syndrome. They view his photography skill to have been an ability, a skill triggered and brought to life as a product of the stagecoach crash. One of Muybridge's most notable photography works was through a series of photographs capturing a horse actively galloping. Use a series of cameras to capture every minuscule stride. It may seem insignificant, but this photograph series answered the age-old and mysterious questions of how horses go about galloping exactly. Whether they lift up all their limbs at once, or if they lift the anterior limbs, followed by the posterior limbs. The series was a product of 5 years in the making, with the aid of a man named Leland Stanford. Stanford owned and had a passion for horses. He had a hypothesis in mind that proposed that there is a point in time when all of a horse's limbs are above ground at once while galloping. He called on Muybridge to assist him in proving this point. Originally, he thought the idea to be ludicrous but ended up taking on the challenge. Being a perfectionist, it wasn't until 5 years later that he was finally satisfied with the photograph's products. Muybridge ran into a couple of roadblocks on the way, some avoidable and others rather technical due to the limited photographic resources at the time. One such avoidable interruption was in 1874, when he allegedly attacked his wife's supposed forbidden lover. After discovering an exchange of hidden letters, Muybridge questioned the legitimacy of his son, whom he previously had been confident was his, by allegedly shooting the man whom he suspected his wife's new lover to be. Muybridge ended up going into exile for some time and was eventually acquitted of the crime, so he was able to return to his project with Stanford. In 1878, Muybridge achieved the motion shots of Stanford's horses. He was able to orchestrate a series of cameras in such a manner they were able to capture shots that cameras at the time typically took minutes to capture. In Muybridge's case, the 12 photos that made up the infamous series were captured within seconds, which was revolutionary at the time. This very concept set the stage for the production of motion pictures. It also had an effect on the scientific community, prompting them to use images as a form of credible data in support of experiments, as well as sparking interest to delve deeper into researching motion in other animals. The series also had a profound effect on the art community, in pointing out errors in horse-themed artwork, and led to more accurate displays in the genre. It's safe to say the series gathered a lot of attention, and notoriety put Muybridge under the spotlight to say the least. So what do you make of these people who gain superpowers? People and animals often live in harmony, but every once in a while you'll hear about a time where that perfect harmony was, well, less than ideal. Sometimes a person might push it too far, be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or simply there is an incredible animal out there in the world that's just plain scary. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 interesting stories. 1. Queensland teen's entanglement with a crocodile. 18-year-old leader Paul decided that he could evade the wrath of a crocodile-infested river because he thought he would be spared since he was a true Aussie instead of a tourist. However, this ended the complete opposite of how he thought. As he was trying to impress his date that evening, he thought it would be a good idea to jump into the Johnston River in Innisfail. While this is generally unsafe to do at night, The problem with this specific case was that the river was crawling with crocodiles that grow up to 23 feet long. Lee was in the water for only a brief few seconds before the crocodile sunk his teeth into him. He recalls that he thought he was gone for sure in the first moments of the attack. He quickly realized his response needed to be swift to escape the jaws of the predator. After 2 punches to its snout, it let go, and Lee swiftly hurried to find some stairs and climbed out of the water. After the attack, he admits that it was pure stupidity prompting him to jump in the water. However, after his efforts trying to impress the girl, which is why he jumped in the first place, she claimed she was far from impressed. She spoke to a news station and stated, "Risking your life, there's nothing funny about that. Therefore, no, I'm not impressed by it. That would be an odd word to use. I think he's very brave to be in such high spirits after what happened. But no, not impressed by someone risking their life in such a way." She agreed to see Lee again, so maybe it was worth it if you asked him. However, 3 months later, the 18-year-old crocodile survivor was arrested for attempting to steal a car and attacking 2 police officers. Angel Yanagihara was stung by a box jellyfish. In Taleo, the Philippines, a little boy named Prince Gabriel Mbarang passed away from the sting of the deadly box jellyfish. This was only one of at least 3 cases of youths passing away due to the creatures, and scientist Angel Yanagihara was going to put a stop to it. She arrived on the beach and set off on her mission to catch one of these venomous translucent she waited offshore. She spent the day looking for them to no avail, though villagers did bring her a few to help her with her mission. Jellyfish things might not seem like a prevalent problem in your part of the world, but millions of people get stung each year and a few dozen of those people pass away. But many of these people who lose their lives still go unreported. After the news of the young toddler's fatal accident in the media, Yanagihara was invited by the Lucena health officials to come to speak about their venom and ways to save its victims. Yanagihara said that her research suggested that jellyfish venom contains proteins that puncture red blood cells and release mass amounts of potassium, messing with the heart's electrical rhythms. Her conclusions are based on 20 years of science and hold evidence that colleagues and scholars say to be imaginative and thorough. Still, the jellyfish venom scientific field is not too vast, and the ability to test, compare, and research methods of treatment and causes of loss of life are not yet easily attainable. Some researchers disagree simply because they have different ideas of treating and understanding these toxins. Because funders prefer to focus on broader health issues, there are only about 5 programs that study jellyfish venom and its antidotes. Most jellyfish species just sting and cause discomfort for the humans affected. Only cubozoans or box jellyfish stings are fatal. They inject a tiny harpoon of venom while stinging their victim and are almost completely see-through, making them dangerous to swimmers in their waters. As for Angel Yanagihara, her passion for studying jellyfish comes from a personal experience of her own. She had not planned to study jellyfish, but ended up in the field after she had a deadly encounter with box jellyfish off the shore while she was going for a swim. She felt the needles pressing into her arms and neck and her lungs collapsing. Her arms began to fail. She practiced breathing and clawed her way back to the shore. And she decided she had to know about the thing that almost took her life. Some jellyfish stings cause something called Irukandji syndrome, where stress hormones and proteins can cause pain and nausea, eventually leading to a brain hemorrhage. Horrifically, most cases end up having a heart attack within minutes of the sting. Yanagihara continued her research, sometimes excruciating and challenging, given the yield of the poison collected from the sample specimens is so small. Still, she has found that zinc gluconate nullifies the proteins that work against the body in the case of a sting, and she realized that she could make this into a product to put on the stings. When giving a talk, a young man walked up from the beach holding a box jellyfish. He tried to hand it over to Yanagihara to give her the specimen to research and was accidentally lashed by one of the tendrils. Immediately they applied the spray that their research had developed, and the man sat through the rest of the 90-minute lecture, mostly unaffected. Today, Yanagihara continues her study of the application of vinegar, her sprays and ointments to make progress in treating these deadly stings. The blue-ringed octopus venturing further into the mysterious world of the ocean deep, we're going to talk about another venomous sea creature that lurks in the bottom of the water. The blue-ringed octopus is actually a small and quite beautiful creature, but has a venom that can end the life of almost 20 humans with one toxin dose. They are yellow with blue and brown rings, not much larger than your hand, but they are anything but cute and pretty with how they can attack. The good news about these enigmatic specimens is that they don't often attack. They will only confront a predator if they feel threatened, and at that point, they'll bite the victim in a small and painless way, many people not even realizing if they've been bitten or not. The venom causes respiratory depression and paralysis, and it has over 9 kinds of toxins in one bite. The scariest part about this creature is that there is no antivenom for it. Tetrodotoxin causes severe and total body paralysis. The victims can be totally aware of their surroundings, but completely unable to move. Because of the stiffness, they will have no way to signal distress or call for help, which is usually the thing that ends up being life-threatening and fatal if the victim can't communicate that this is what they are enduring. Suppose artificial respiration is administered in the first few moments. In that case, the victim can avoid hypertension and cyanosis development. And usually if they survive the first 24 hours, they make a full recovery. However, there are a lot of creatures that lurk below the surface that you may never have heard about. But as we've seen today, maybe you'll think twice about stepping somewhere you can't see under the surface. But what do you make of these nerve-wracking animal stories? A new monolith has just shown up in Kluba Keep. Reports have said the monolith seemingly came out of nowhere, and photographs emerged of it being guarded by the military. This site is of historical importance. It was commonly believed in the timeline of humanity that human beings first formed tribes, then villages, then developed agriculture, and then formed complex nations and allies and so on. This might not be the case anymore as archaeologists uncover the site of Göbekli Tepe. The dating for the stones in the area appears to go as far back as 10,000 BCE, a much older point in time than people realize humans could have formed complex cities and temples. It's due to this that the site is regarded by many as the single most important archaeological discovery, due to the fact that its existence and findings could profoundly change the understanding that we have of the crucial stages in the early development period of human society. Unfortunately, given its importance, a lot of information has been lost due to tourists removing chunks of rocks or important engravings for them to keep. This has led researchers to halt any further research. First attempt to preserve the site for future conservation before any other crucial historical information is lost forever. Now that this monolith has appeared, it's caused a variety of different theories to be put forward. The monolith measures 3 meters or 9.8 feet and is 1 meter or 3.2 feet wide. The block is carved with words of Göktürk, which is an old Turkic scrims. It says, "Look to the sky if you want to see the moon." Locals close to the region had been flooding there so they can get a glimpse of the monolith. But others have said they're worried and they want officials to get answers for how it suddenly appeared. Even the governor wanted to be taken to the site so they could investigate and see the monolith for themselves. There's still speculation about what these monoliths are and why they were being placed in various locations across our planet. The going theory is that these are just pieces of artwork, and people were installing them as pranks, but others have said they don't think these are made by everyday people and that they should be investigated. A few people have said the same thing about this monolith, and this is how has someone managed to sneak into a historical archaeological site without being seen, with another saying that if this was made in someone's garage, why is the military protecting it? It seems strange that officials would go to the lengths of getting military personnel to guard the monolith. This all started in Utah. Going back a few months ago, the Utah Highway Patrol posted a photograph to social media, showing a mysterious metallic-looking object protruding from the ground. It immediately went viral, with people giving their opinions on what they thought the object was and what is placed there. However, officials soon announced that the monolith had been stolen. The Bureau of Land Management said the following on Facebook: "Here is our official statement on the rumors surrounding the monolith. We have received credible reports that the illegal installed structure, referred to as the monolith, has been removed from Bureau Land Management public lands by an unknown party. The BLM did not remove the structure, which is considered private property. We do not investigate crimes involving private property, which are handled by the local sheriff's office. The structure has received international and national attention, and we receive reports that a person or group removed it on the evening of November 27th. End quote. This caused outrage as many people were interested in what this structure was. It also caused various theories to be put forward for why this structure was removed, with one person saying the following on Facebook: "It's strange how this massive monolith was erected in public land without anyone seeing who did it. The object has no scratches on it, seems to be in mint condition, and no one has claimed to be behind the creation, and now all of a sudden the object goes missing under mysterious circumstances. This whole discovery is just weird. I know people are joking about this being aliens, but why is there so much mystery around this object? Something is not adding up here." End quote. While another person said the following about the mysterious disappearance: "I just don't understand how someone would be able to steal this thing. At one point people were queuing to see the structure. Many people went out into Utah to find this thing, and it wasn't even hard to find as the coordinates were on Google. How does someone just steal a 15-foot monolith without anyone seeing it or recording it? There's definitely something going on here." End quote. Not long after this, another monolith turned up in Romania, and this one looked very similar to the one that were missing in Utah. This structure appeared in northern Romania, close to the archaeological landmark known as Petrova Fortress, a fort that was built around 82 BC. One of the first things that people noticed about this monolith was that it didn't look as clean as the one in Utah, and that when you look to the base it appears to have some dig marks around it. This caused some to say the structure was just installed here. Now the question is this part of some global prank, where these structures are going to be placed in various locations? Or is someone trying to take some of the heat away from the monolith that was discovered in Utah? The obvious difference between these two structures is that one does not look man-made, not having a shine to it and looking a bit rough, something that does look like it was built as part of a prank. However, the one in Utah looks more professional, which is where the idea of it being an art piece came from. Also, the one in Romania has scratch marks on it. As of right now, the monolith in Göbekli Tepe is being guarded by military officials. And hopefully we can get an answer for what it is and how someone was able to sneak in and install it. So what do you make of this recent monolith that's been installed? Do you think it's an art piece? Or do you think there's something more mysterious going on? The evolutionary history, modern biology, and understanding of anatomy within humans is a complicated concept. A story riddled with rewrites and misconceptions to be corrected to an alternate understanding, only to be reconceptualized once again. So with all these muddled responses, the archaeological and historical findings here are crucial to developing the modern understanding of our very own species. Sometimes glancing into the past gives us a window to the future, aiding in understanding ancestry and evolution down to our very bones. These have practical applications to medicine and modern advancements. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at biological and archaeological advancements in our understandings of humans. Pacific Islanders appear to be carrying the DNA of an unknown human species. For centuries, archaeologists, biologists, and interested followers of science have held the belief that there are two ancient species of human relatives, though recent findings appear to counter this widely spread assumption. In the South Pacific region, northeast of Australia, the DNA analysis of the population Melanesians has been found to contain traces of a human species outside of the binary we currently know of. This third, now seemingly extinct human species has never been seen before. The assumptions of Neanderthal Adenosovan being the only ancient species was derived from fossil records, though now, despite a distinct lack of fossils indicating this, we have found a third, unknown, ancient, presumably extinct human strain of DNA within a living modern society. How has this species evaded our research for so many years? This research comes as a result of new technology, allowing us to complete genetic modeling with greater accuracy. Though this does not make the new data any less baffling. A statistical geneticist working at and representing the University of Texas, Ryan Bolander, stated, "We're missing a population, or we're misunderstanding something about the relationships." He offered an alternative solution to the narrative. Most are explaining that perhaps this is not a new species, but rather resembles a misinterpretation or flaws in the data we currently have. Either way, this is groundbreaking and entirely revolutionizes the understanding of our own biology, history, development, and evolutionary line. Bolander had headed up the team as lead researcher. He and his team have been looking for the percentages of this previously unseen branch of human DNA. This research into the exact percentages of homin DNA has revealed anomalies and variations that suggest there is something more than a mere mixture of Neanderthal and Denisovans at play here. It appears we have a missing part to this puzzle. At the moment, we understand that somewhere between 100,000 and 60,000 years ago, the ancestors to the modern human race migrated out of Africa and moved towards the European and Asian mainland, where the first contact was made between these two hominid species and communities. The impacts of this association linger still today, with the vast majority of European and Asian people having traceable genetic variations distinctive to the Eurasian Neanderthals within the modern society's lives. But some more recent advancements upon this established research came in 2016, with the understanding that people who are European of whom have European ancestors and therefore genetic traits and genomes that reflect those of the Neanderthals have been found to have correlations with increased risks of depression, cardiovascular illnesses such as heart attacks, and numerous skin disorders. Furthermore, a separate study saw that what we now know as HPV was existent in these species, spread through intimate contact. The issues encountered within the possible discovery of a third human species comes through in the limited understanding of the species we already know of. Whilst we have established the existence and presence of both Neanderthals and Denisovan species, we have masses of documentation for Neanderthals, meaning our understanding is relatively advanced and there is wide representation within our fossil records. Denisovans, on the other hand, we have very little evidence for, varying sparingly only to a single long finger bone and a few teeth. These were found within a cave in Siberia in 2008. The confusing results of the 2016 study show a far more complicated map of human history, much less isolated and far more intertwined than we had ever imagined. Computer modeling predicts modern Europeans and Chinese people hold a 2.8% quantity of Neanderthal DNA. This is concordant with the pre-existing research, which ranged between 1.5 and 4% for all European and Asian peoples. These lines became far more blurred when conducting an analysis of Denisovan DNA. There appears to be no hint, trace, or slightest appearance of Denisovan DNA in any European populations today, with a little over 0.1% trace within Chinese people's DNA. The Denisovan DNA for Melanesian populations, according to Bolander, does not align with the data previously collected. The new research team says the quantity of Denisovan DNA present is closer to 1.11%, not the 3 to 6% previously hypothesized. This is one indication of a third hominid group involved in reproduction. There appeared to be similarities but distinct variations away from Denisovan DNA, presenting the idea of a previously unstudied third unknown identified group of hominids. The ideal outcome next would be to stumble across some fossils that confirm these suggestions. These findings are yet to undergo academic formality processes, such as peer-reviewed processes, meaning these suggestions may still fall under criticism, rendering them inconclusive. One possible complication is that we simply do not know enough about Denisovan DNA, as we have merely a single finger bone and a few teeth from which to draw these conclusions. This web is becoming more tangled with new research being found, both in support and contradiction. Regardless as to the conclusions drawn, this remains the sole most comprehensive research into indigenous Australian groups, considering societies more than 50,000 years old. Whether the idea of a third hominid is dismissed or we find supporting evidence, these modern discoveries and research have told us just how complex our human history is and how remarkable that of all possible variations and combinations, centuries, even millenniums of reproduction have accumulated to form today's humans. The 7 human footprints are likely the oldest evidence of Homo sapiens on the Arabian Peninsula. The autumn of 2020 saw a remarkable archaeological discovery that gave us a glimpse into the lives of ancient humans, where we traveled and possible actions taken within daily routines. There were preserved human footprints found in Saudi Arabia's Nef-Or Desert, where a lake once Saturday, but only for a brief interaction over 100,000 years ago. There has been an analysis of the rock around this area, concluding that the sediment dates to being between 112,000 and 121,000 years old. If this dating is in fact accurate, then this makes these 7 human footprints the oldest evidence that we know of to support the presence of early Homo sapiens on the Arabian Peninsula. Biologist Matthew Stewart, affiliated with the Max Planck Institute for Chemical Ecology in Jena, Germany, and colleagues, explained that the ancient Homo sapiens were more than likely employing the site, referred to as Alathar, as a watering hole. Further explanations explain this is a likely spot to gather food due to neighboring grasslands. However, many do not think that this was a regular visit, as the research conducted upon the sediment indicated the lake had been shrinking, like many in the region in this time. Furthermore, very few hunting tools and animal bones being present implies a short-term visit, too. Similar sites have found 107 camel footprints and 43 elephant footprints, though none of these carry as much scientific weight and potential for new studies as the human footprints found. New ancient human species bones uncovered in the Philippines. In the Philippines in 2019, human fossils were revealed within a cave on Luzon, a large island in the Philippines. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of these human fossils is the possibility that these early humans may have adapted to climb trees, illustrated through the curves found within finger and toe bones. This species has been considered to be distinct from Homo sapiens, acquiring the Homo luzonensis. We are currently acting under the assumption that this ancient species lived 50,000 to 80,000 years ago alongside the Neanderthals and the Denisovans. Dartmouth College Homo foot bone expert Jeremy De Silva explains that this discovery mirrors the discovery of Homo floresiensis, nicknamed a hobbit found within Indonesia. He stated, "1 is interesting, 2 is a pattern." His response suggests that we may be drawing close to potential breakthroughs in the field. A team way back in 2007 found a metatarsal. The discovery of this foot bone, also in Luzon, alongside the more recent findings, are indicative of a species that is definitely a member of the same genus as modern-day humans. The team also stumbled across 2 teeth, 2 finger bones, 2 toe bones, and a femur. Are that these belong to 3 separate people? Some experts remain skeptical, suggesting that more evidence is needed before we begin drawing concrete conclusions. Many are concerned as to the condition of DNA after all this time, as humid conditions can cause the deterioration of DNA rather rapidly, leading to a lack of validity in data. Whether this is a new ancient species related to modern humans, or an expansion of a separate species within our genus, these bones are promising to the future of paleontological and archaeological research. Our history as humans is a jigsaw that we are still finding the pieces for, but with each new discovery we get a little closer to finding out just where we came from. What do you make of these interesting discoveries? The Dyatlov Pass incident in many people's eyes has remained a mystery, but now scientists from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology have said they've finally closed the case on what happened. The Swiss Federal Institute of Technology used state-of-the-art technology and created computer models to prove their theory. Scientists said that what actually happened was an unusual type of delayed avalanche, and this was the cause of their demise. For those unaware, the Dyatlov Pass incident happened back in 1959. At the time, the Soviet Union was still hidden behind the Iron Curtain that blocked all information from effectively getting out into the media, or even the rest of the world. During this era, a mysterious incident had occurred that still inspires fear and curiosity. Known as the Dyatlov Pass incident, Nansky hikers went up to the northern Ural Mountains between the 1st and 2nd of February, in the hopes of conquering the area that was feared by the locals due to superstitions and strange rumors. These hikers would hope that in exploring the region that would put to rest any worries the locals had, and hoped that by doing this it would pave the way for new hikers to visit the area and enjoy the scenic beauty of the region. Unfortunately, this decision would lead to the death of the 9 highly trained and experienced hikers, and would solidify the superstitiousness of the area. On the 26th of February, a rescue team had discovered the group's abandoned and badly damaged tents that had been established on the slopes. The sight seemed perplexing, as it became apparent that the tent was cut open from the inside, as if the group had begun panicking and cut through the tent in an effort to get away from something that was attacking them. The bodies of each of the individuals in the group were found in a nearby ravine, and this was after following their tracks in the snow, which only led to more mysteries as the majority of the bodies recovered were dressed only in their underwear, as if they ran out into the darkness of snow without first getting dressed, and then presumably froze to death. As the investigation continued and the bodies of the deceased were put under examination, the theory of hypothermia soon came into question. Medical examiners discovered that each person suffered from internal injuries commonly seen in a car crash. or after a massive amount of pressure and force comes into striking contact with a person. This led many to believe that perhaps the individuals were attacked by a non-human entity, capable of causing such terrible force and leading to their deaths. Unfortunately, this theory and others like it can never be confirmed or denied. However, fast forward to the present day, and researchers from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology have said they've cracked what happened. After creating different models and scenarios, the team said that what most likely happened was the hikers caused a cut in the snow while they were settling down for camp. This in turn caused a small section of the surface to form what they described as a shoulder. They did this because they believed it would shield them from the elements. The scientists said though this was where they made a fatal error. Creating this shoulder led to it creating an avalanche. The thing they said eventually caused their demise. When questioned about the hikers and how they were found in unusual places, and even with certain body parts removed, they said that this was normal and this is usually seen when a slab avalanche hits. Professor Alexander Prazerin, one of the lead researchers at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, said that the cut snow and an unusual weather event known as katabatic winds was enough to trigger the event. Katabatic winds carry strong air down a slope, which in turn helps it carry snow. The professor said the following: the katabatic wind probably drifted the snow and allowed an extra load to build up slowly. At a certain point, a crack could have formed and propagated, causing the snow slab to release. End quote. Co-author Dr. Johan Guejam said the following: we use data on snow friction and local topography to prove a small slab avalanche could occur on a gentle slope, leaving few traces behind. End quote. The mountain where the hikers were is notorious for strange happenings and for being hazardous. In fact, the mountain's name means don't go there in the language of the Mansi. Scientists have said the case can now be later addressed, and that the hikers were unfortunately in the wrong place at the wrong time. Over the years, this theory has been the one that's been backed by researchers who have looked into the incident, and although it answers many questions, there's some that feel it doesn't explain everything. Amateur researchers have decided to do their own research and look into what happened, and they said there's a lot of details that scientists and researchers leave out when they present their theories. Interestingly, when you start looking into the history of the area, it was reported that there hadn't been an avalanche before, with locals and those who visited the region saying there's no history of avalanches that have been recorded and certainly nothing that could cause humans any harm. Also, if there was an avalanche in the region, it would have happened at the exact point that the hikers were staying at, something that seems very unlikely. Another point is that when investigators started to look into possible causes, they found no evidence of there being an avalanche during the period in which the hikers were on the mountain, and that the injuries the hikers sustained didn't line up with this theory. With this news, it's only made some put forward the idea of a cover-up, and this brought in a wave of new theories about what actually happened to the hikers. One idea that doesn't get much spotlight is that the hikers were victims of escaped prisoners. Some suggested that during the time in which the hikers were on the mountain, war prisoners were roaming the areas they just escaped from in nearby camps, accidentally been discovered by them and in a moment of panic lashed out. This may have been the only option for them at the time, as they would have rather attacked people they didn't know than be turned into Soviet authorities. As mentioned, though, this isn't backed by modern scientists, and they've said the case should be later raised. So what do you make of the Dark Love Pass incident? Do you think the hikers were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and were victims of an avalanche? Or do you think something else happened? Human beings are pretty incredible creatures from a scientific perspective. We have developed over millions of years to do extraordinary things, from creating the internet to putting people into space to curing the worst that nature throws at us. Yet, we shouldn't just measure people's impact on the world by the amount of groundbreaking things that they've achieved. Everybody, whether they believe it or not, makes a difference to somebody else every single day. We do this by simply being social creatures and interacting with our fellow humans. Sometimes, however, people do things that are a little bit special. They are not necessarily widely reported, and you may never hear of these things, but they happen nonetheless. So today, we'll be taking a look at incredible things that people have done which you might not know of. The man who planted 6,000 trees. Trees are wonderful things, and you do not need to be a climate activist to understand and appreciate their existence. They produce oxygen through photosynthesis, which allows us to breathe. They create some of the most outstanding natural beauty we have. And they provide a home to some of the most amazing animals on the planet. In 2005, a man from England named Winston housed used trees to do something pretty amazing. Winston was happily married to a lady named Janet for over 30 years. They wed in 1962 and spent countless hours together over the years. The pair would have seen the moon landing together, lived through the Thatcher government of the 80s, witnessed from afar the Challenger disaster, the assassination of Martin Luther King, and the erection and fall of the Berlin Wall, all from their happy home in South Gloucestershire. But in 1995, Janet suddenly passed away from a heart attack, leaving Winston a widower with a broken heart. Naturally, Winston wanted to do something to remember his wife by, but his idea was a little more extreme than a normal send-off. In a good way. Fast forward about 15 years, and a hot air balloonist named Andy Collett was flying over the South Gloucestershire area, specifically over a tiny part of the county called Watton Hill. A regular guy, Andy most definitely was not planning to see anything quite like he did when he took his balloon out that day. So what connects Andy and Winston, whose stories lie almost 20 years apart from each other? That was Winston's wish to remember his wife in an extra special way. He was a farmer by trade, so was used to being in and around nature. But Winston managed to keep his secret, well, very secret, which is surprising given that it's quite the statement piece. So what was it that Andy noticed that day in his hot air balloon? Well, it was a small forest that stood out from the rest of the treeless, rolling countryside. However, the trees had been planted in such a way that they formed a heart-shaped meadow in the middle. How this had managed to stay hidden, so to speak, for 15 or so years, who knows? But when Winston was interviewed in 2012, he also revealed that a daffodil patch grows in the middle of the heart, an extra tribute to his late wife. There are roughly 6,000 trees planted, quite the send-off. And what a heartwarming romantic story. Iowa carpenter paid 33 Iowans to attend college with $3 million fund. A study in 2019 revealed that despite Iowa not having a particularly high poverty rate compared to some of the USA's southern states, around 1 in 8 Iowans actually live below the government's defined poverty line. University costs differ depending on where you go in the states. So it is no surprise that some of the most talented kids miss out purely due to financial reasons. However, Dale Schroeder decided he wanted to change this before he passed away in 2005. When it comes to making a difference, we often only hear about new government schemes or very rich individuals who are constantly in the media undertaking charity ventures. But as Dale proved posthumously, you don't necessarily have to be famous to do something amazing. Dale was a humble carpenter and had worked for roughly 67 years before retiring. His friends described him as a regular guy who went to work every day, worked really hard, and was frugal like a lot of Iowans. Dale did not appear to be particularly well off. He had no wife or children and had never lived a life of luxury from the day he was born in 1919. But unbeknownst to nearly all of Dale's friends and colleagues, he had been saving an awful lot of money. Soon before he passed away, Dale went to see a lawyer to work out his inheritance payments. When he arrived, the lawyer was expecting to see a few $1,000s saved up, no more than you'd expect the average carpenter to have saved, respectively. However, Dale saved an incredible $3 million. But what did Dale need $3 million for? Or more to the point, how had he managed to save that much money? One of Dale's friends, Steve Nielsen, told the news that he had once discussed Dale's inheritance with him. What he was going to do with no immediate next of kin. That was when Dale had revealed the extraordinary figure to him. Dale apparently told Nielsen that, given he'd never had the chance to go to college, all of those $3 million were there to send some of Iowa's brightest but poorest children to university, to give them the chance he never had. In the years after his passing, the $3 million sent 33 Iowans to college, completely for free. Some of Dale's kids, as they dubbed themselves, have gone on to become doctors, teachers, and more, each without the weight of an $80,000 loan to pay back. In 2019, the 33 kids got together to remember a man who they'd never met, yet had, essentially, given them the chance to have a fulfilling life. Without this man, this would have never happened. Man builds wife an airplane house. In 1999, a man named Saeed Jamal, who lives in Abuja, Nigeria, began construction on his new home. Millions of people across the world decide to build their own houses, often because they are looking for a dream home that simply may not exist. But it's probably fair to say that Jamal's dream home, or his wife's, for that matter, was a little more ambitious than the homes available on the Nigerian property market at the time. Jamal and his family, 8 people in total, did eventually settle somewhere in Abuja. But they did not feel like their new home was special enough. It was not unique to them. So Jamal decided to do something about it. His wife loved to travel, and he wanted to incorporate this passion into his project. In an interview with the BBC, he spoke of his desire to help his wife feel like she was always traveling, or more specifically, always on an airplane. Fast forward about 20 years and Jamal has captured the attention of the world media with his airplane-shaped house. Although the house is neither built out of an airplane fuselage as has previously been done in various places around the world, the roof of the house has been transformed into the shape of an airliner, except this one is made entirely out of concrete. The airplane house sits on a fairly large estate in Abuja, and given Jamal's background in construction, he was able to redevelop the house mostly by himself, although he did note that his 6 children would all help with the build every day after school. Jamal has a true love for Nigeria, and he hopes that the airplane house, as well as being a unique place to live, will be savored as a tourist landmark for years to come. Nigeria as a country often gets a lot of bad press. This tends to focus on the poverty in the country, as well as evident corruption and political oppression. In this respect, Jamal and his family are also changing Nigeria's image for the outside world by doing something that will be remembered for all the right reasons: a man, his family, and his love for them. We have traveled between 3 different continents, each very different, but one thing is clear, that there are people all over the world from all walks of life who have good hearts and want to do something special for those they love. But what do you make of these heartwarming gestures from 3 very ordinary people? Ancient Egypt is a mystical land, one of pharaohs, pyramids, sandy deserts, and extreme riches. The Egyptians hold an important place in world history, with infamous, legendary stories still told about the ancient dynasty today, such as those of Cleopatra, Mark Antony, Julius Caesar, King Tut, the Sphinx, and more. The developments of the ancient Egyptian world are still seen today, despite the empire existing almost 5,000 years ago. The Egyptians' huge advancements in writing, reading, communication, and several other areas have had a profound impact on modern life. One of the most famous Egyptians was the queen of the 18th dynasty, Nefertiti. She ruled at a time in which the Egyptian empire was at its richest, and her life poses questions to this day. The same can be said about much of the life of the ancient Egyptians, that may never be uncovered. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 Egyptian and Nefertiti mysteries. Who is the KV-21b mummy? Ancient Egypt is known for its mummies. These preserved corpses wrapped in swaths of cloth are one of the most popularized images of the Egyptian empire. Mummies are both creepy and fascinating. However, the mysteries that surround mummified Egyptians are both intriguing and complex. The Valley of the Kings is a sprawling plethora of ancient Egyptian burial chambers and tombs that lie below the sandy plains near Luxor, southern Egypt, on the banks of the River Nile. Researchers have found roughly 65 tombs at the site, with rulers from the 18th to the 22nd dynasty buried there. The 18th dynasty in ancient Egypt spanned from around 1550 BC to 1292 BC. The most famous of the 18th dynasty rulers was Tutankhamun, or King Tut, as he is more commonly referred to. The 18th dynasty was also a groundbreaking period in the Egyptian era, being the only dynasty that had 2 women who ruled Egypt as sole pharaoh. One of these women was the Queen Nefertiti. Nefertiti was the wife of Akhenaten, the 10th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. He is known for being heretic and abandoning the traditional religion of the Egyptians in favor of a religion called Atenism, which, as well as being named after Akhenaten, centered on the worship of the god Aten. Nefertiti's fame was propelled by her husband's controversies, but also because she is thought to be the aunt of Tutankhamun. It is rumored that Nefertiti also ruled herself for a short period after Akhenaten passed away before Tutankhamun's ascension to the throne. One of Nefertiti's daughters, called Ankhesenamun, would later marry King Tut. He and Anka Saneman had 2 daughters at least, and this brings us to the true mystery surrounding the KV-21B mummy. Tomb KV-21 in the Valley of the Kings was discovered in 1817 and re-explored some years later in 1989. In the tomb, the researchers found 2 mummies, both in fairly poor condition but relatively intact. CT scanning and DNA analysis was carried out in 2010. And the first mummy, termed KV-21A, was discovered to contain the same DNA as Tutankhamun. In other words, KV-21A is likely to be his wife, Anka Saneman. The tomb of Nefertiti is still yet to be officially found, but it's thought that KV-21B is her. The DNA collected from KV-21B is even less definitive, but given that other tombs in it's thought that Anka Saneman may be buried with her mother Nefertiti. If scientists can verify the KV-21B corpse, then it would be one of the most ancient Egyptian discoveries to date. Did Kathleen Martinez find Cleopatra's lost tomb? Cleopatra is perhaps the most infamous Egyptian ruler. However, contrary to popular belief, she was not actually Egyptian. In fact, she was Greek, but she ruled over the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt between 51 BC and 30 BC. She was the last ruler of Egypt whilst it was in the hands of the Ptolemaic Empire before the Romans stormed in and annexed it as part of the Great Roman Empire. Cleopatra has been immortalized in popular culture to this day. Films have been made about her life, masses of literature written, artwork painted, and sculptures sculpted. She is best known for her manipulative involvement in the Roman civil wars, wooing Mark Antony away from his friend Octavian's sister, as well as being romantically involved with Antony's friend Julius Caesar. Despite Cleopatra's affairs with both men, she was seen as a symbol of beauty and perfection in the ancient world. Despite her seductive nature, however, mysteries still surround the last queen of the Ptolemaic dynasty. One of these mysteries is where Cleopatra's tomb is situated. Like most of the Egyptian rulers, tombs give a fascinating insight into the life of the ruler, who they were related to, and how much esteem they were held in by their subjects. Cleopatra is thought to have been buried with Mark Antony. Various expeditions have set out to locate Cleopatra's tomb, and the most recent theory as to where she was buried has come from Dominican lawyer and diplomat Kathleen Martinez. She believes that Cleopatra could be buried in or underneath a temple near the town of Topazirus Magna. In the present day, the town is called Abu Sur and lies 28 miles west of Alexandria, where said to have lived. Topazirus Magna was a bustling port in ancient Egypt with vineyards famed for their rich wines. Whilst there is a possibility that Cleopatra may have been buried here, some believe that she may have actually requested a secret burial. The ancient Egyptians were spiritual people, and Cleopatra may have wished to be laid to rest where no one would disturb her eternal life together with Mark Antony. The problem is that Egyptian rulers were not known for being buried in temples. Temples were places of worship, and rulers tended to request to be buried in great tombs underneath the sandy plains of the Egyptian desert. However, when Kathleen Martinez and her team began excavating, they found a shaft that led to a great cavern underneath the desert, which appeared to have been decorated extensively. This, they believe, could be part of Cleopatra's tomb. Some academics believe that Cleopatra's tomb is harder to find because it may have actually been robbed hundreds of years ago. After all, rulers in ancient Egypt were buried elaborately with selections of expensive materials that would aid them in the afterlife. Cleopatra's tomb would therefore likely have been a decent place for any thief to make a bit of money. Kathleen Martinez is far from finding any real evidence of Cleopatra being buried in the temple. The mystery goes on. For how long? We do not know. Where else could Cleopatra be buried? As the archaeological community continues to search for Cleopatra, theories and rumors continue to emerge as to her final resting place. It's important to remember that 20% of ancient Alexandria, the town where Cleo and Mark Antony lived, is actually underwater. So there is always a chance that their tomb sits at the bottom of the sea, in which case it's not likely that it will ever be found. In fact, French researchers began to excavate underwater in the 1990s and did find several indications of ancient life in the town. These included busts, stone sphinxes, building foundations, and more. However, nothing concrete came up directly regarding Cleopatra and Mark Antony's tomb. Therefore, the search went on. The authorities began to map the seabed and more ancient structures emerged. But they failed to find any conclusive evidence of Cleopatra's tomb. The team want to find a statue or commemorative piece of Cleopatra, which in turn may point to a tomb or burial site. Chances are, however, that this burial site is actually deep under the seafloor. Returning to Kathleen Martinez's theory of the temple burial, she spoke of why she believed that Queen Cleo had been buried in a temple. The Egyptians were superstitious religious people, and the religious link may have some weight to it. Kathleen Martinez said, "What brought me to the conclusion that Taposiris Magna was a possible place for Cleopatra's hidden tomb was the idea that when she passed away, a ritual act of deep religious significance was carried out in a very strict, spiritualized ceremony. Cleopatra negotiated with Octavian to allow her to bury Mark Antony in Egypt. She wanted to be buried with him because she wanted to reenact the legend of Isis and Osiris. The meaning of Osiris is that it grants immortality. After they have both passed away, the gods would allow Cleopatra to live with Antony in another form of existence, so they would have eternal life together. The sea, the land, or underneath both are all plausible locations where Cleopatra could have been buried. However, for the time being, it looks like the mystery continues. These mysteries continue to confuse researchers to this day. After all, a dynasty that existed thousands of years ago is bound to elicit many questions, some running deeper than others. But what do you make of these Egyptian and Nefertiti mysteries? We all live our day-to-day lives on ground level, from the people we talk to every day to the places that we walk to for work or leisure. There isn't much mystery left to our daily surroundings. However, what's underground is a completely different story. It's known that the Earth is over 4.5 billion years old. Ever since the beginning of evolution, the planet has built layers upon layers, covering up ancient history that has long since been forgotten, until the first fossils were uncovered. The Titanic would never have been found again if explorers did not descend more than 12,600 feet under the surface. Although society has uncovered a lot of lost history, there is still much that we have not explored. For instance, the Mariana Trench remains the deepest point in the ocean, extending over 1,500 miles long into the belly of the Earth. Has not reached yet for us to discover such unknown places. However, scientists and archaeologists are uncovering new artifacts every day. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 remarkable discoveries: claw artifacts and the Mocha civilization. Down south in Peru near Trujillo, archaeologists were digging and came across an unknown tomb. From the looks of it, they quickly discovered that it was the tomb of a nobleman from the pre-Inca civilization known as the Mocha. The Mocha people were from a civilization that was said to have emerged from the time of the birth of Christ and long reigned for 800 years in Peru. Even though they came before our modern society, they were incredibly advanced for the era. They excelled in areas such as agriculture and especially in art, having created many intricate pottery, jewelry, weapons, and armor. However, despite their technological advancements, they did not keep many written records. As a result, many details of their culture, such as certain dates, are difficult to make out. Despite the lack of records, the Mocha people had a polytheistic religion which encompassed regular blood sacrifices to guarantee good weather. Sometimes that even involved drinking the blood of victims. Still, the Mocha people are most well known for their huacas, or the types of pyramids that they built. There are 2 tall constructions known as the Huaca de la Luna and the Huaca del Sol, which represent the moon and sun respectively. They both have colorful murals painted on their surface, and are the sites where many artifacts are stored. In the tomb of the nobleman, many artifacts were discovered, which indicated his elite and rich status. Among the collection, one of the most interesting artifacts were ornamental metal pieces that were made to look like feline paws with sharp claws. Perhaps the paws could have been used as part of a ritual costume for ceremonial combat. In these matches, the loser would routinely be sacrificed to the gods. The winner would have been able to keep the costume, metal feline paws included. There were other objects found, including a scepter, a pair of earrings, and a ceramic piece. An archaeologist stated the scepter signifies power. The earrings, status, and the ceramic piece is typical of an elite personage. Therefore, these artifacts carried a great deal of symbolization. The nobleman's bones were also taken for later research. It's believed that the artifacts are at least 1,500 years old. As for the Moshe people, it has been speculated that their civilization collapsed at around 800 AD for mysteriously unknown reasons. All these artifacts and pyramids left behind are the only indication that the Moshe people existed. Perhaps the answer for their ways of life and demise lay within them, waiting to be revealed. Young female hunter uncovered. Our next mysterious find lays within the lands of Peru as well. Archaeologists yet again uncovered a skeleton. This time they realized they had found the bones of a 9,000-year-old young woman who looked like a big game hunter. Perhaps this meant that hunter-gatherer women were more common than previously thought and could bring down even larger animals like vizuna and deer. However, at first, researchers thought that they had unearthed a man. The skeleton was surrounded with projectile points and stone tools. Yet once they did more research, they realized that the bones were lighter than a typical man and that the proteins in the skeleton's dental enamel confirmed that the bones were of a woman, aged between 17 and 19 years old. This was yet another confirmation that proved that female participation in big game hunting was more normal than first thought. After looking at the records of about 429 burials across the Americas around the late Pleistocene and early Holocene epochs, the team identified 27 people buried with such big game hunting tools. So where did the concept of man the hunter come from? Perhaps it first came from the studies of a few hunter-gatherer societies where the men usually hunted big animals while the women gathered more fruits and plant foods. As a result, many scholars thought that this division between hunters and gatherers, according to gender, was universal. However, this uncovered female skeleton alone is changing the tide and challenging our most ingrained gender norms 9,000 years later. Dinosaur fossil of a titanosaur may belong to the largest land animal ever. When you think of a large dinosaur, you might immediately think of the Tyrannosaurus rex with its large body and sharp teeth, perfect for being at the very top of the food chain. However, there might be an even larger land animal. In the region of Patagonia in Argentina, rich with awe-inspiring vistas and fossils, there are many deposits of bones that have been unearthed to reveal the existence of huge dinosaurs that once lumbered around the river deltas. Among smaller findings, paleontologists spent years since 2015 carefully excavating what they believe to be the vertebrae and pelvic bones of a mysterious giant sauropod. Sauropods are dinosaurs that characteristically have long necks and long tails that walk on all fours and eat plants. Even though researchers have not unearthed the entire skeleton, they already have reason to believe that this might be the largest animal to ever set foot on Earth. These fossils were first found in a rock formation called the Candelarios Formation. It came to be when sediment settled in the area from a river floodplain during the Upper Cretaceous period from over 98 million years ago. With rock that old, careful excavation becomes difficult. Because paleontologists do not want to risk breaking the bones in any way, they painstakingly brush away at the rock. Even though most of it still has not been excavated, the team already has uncovered 27 vertebrae from the sauropod's tail along with pelvic and pectoral girdle parts. However, it is already visually apparent that the dinosaur is no ordinary fossil. According to Dr. Alejandro Otero, the bones are between 10 and 20% bigger than the fossils of many previous large dinosaurs found. Now they know it's a titanosaur, which is a type of sauropod. A titanosaur is a sauropod that has been found in fossil beds all over the world, but none as large have been found as in Patagonia. For instance, the Argentinosaurus reached a staggering weight of more than 110 tons, with a height of 20 meters and was 40 meters in length. Newly discovered fossil seems to tower above them all. It's also suggested to be more than 120 feet long. However, researchers can't be sure of the weight until the load-bearing bones, such as the femur and the humerus, are unearthed. Yet, for as big as the sauropod could possibly be, it still fails to stand up to the largest animal in our planet that still exists with us today. Except it's not on land. It's the blue whale that reigns supreme, reaching lengths as long as 30 meters and weighing upwards of 200 tons. It seems that only time will tell as paleontologists continue to work on unearthing this giant once-walking mystery to understand the greatness of this animal. But what do you make of these fascinating discoveries? There is always something about an unknown photograph that's so mysterious and almost haunting. Tons of questions always surface to the mind, like who was in the photo, when was it taken, what were they doing, and what were they thinking. Photos like stories themselves, offering a mystery to solve. Hundreds of millions of them from across history are left without descriptions, forever lost to the past, hidden in the shelves of dusty antique shops. Even though many of these stories have been lost to time, it does not mean that they still can't be found. As the popular saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So today, we'll be taking a look at 3 rare historical photos and finally reveal the hidden stories and tales behind them. 2 Armenian women posing. The caption of this photo describes what it is. On the surface, 2 Armenian women pose with their rifles before going to battle against the Ottomans in 1895. Yet, under the surface, behind their unsmiling expressions, many questions remain. Although this photo is shrouded in mystery, some is known about how these women with rifles came to be. The story takes place in 1895, during a time of great bloodshed and chaos in the Ottoman Empire. It was during the Hamidian massacres where thousands of Armenians were attacked and passed away, which might explain the rifles. However, on the back of the photo, there's a note that says souvenir, so no one ever really knew whether the women were actual fighters or just dressing up to pretend. The woman on the left at least has been identified, however, her friend on the right was never identified. Yet what is known is that both fortunately survived the massacres and found their lives in the United States. The trail of the women then leads to a halt. The rifles also are a source of mystery, leading to a cold stop. They don't look alike to any mass-produced rifle of that day, with many speculating it may be fake due to the chamber area, bolt and cocking piece, and rear sight bases are all not what a normal rifle would look like. The same goes for the revolver sling. The proportions do not match a regular revolver, like around the trigger guard area. Perhaps all these weapons were fake and were made to be props in a photo booth, rather than actual deadly machines. But does that mean the women weren't possible fighters? Not necessarily. Maybe those weapons were handmade instead of mass-produced, or more likely, they would use fakes just for the photo and use actual weapons out on the battlefield. That's because it was not unusual for Armenian women to defend their communities by stepping up to the plate. During the Hamidian massacres and the Armenian genocide, the Ottoman Empire authorities took the men away, which usually meant they would not return home, due to most of them losing their lives. Therefore, as a result, the women and their children were left to defend themselves back home. These civilian defenders who chose to leave their families to come together and form self-defense units to protect themselves from the pillage and slaughter of their surroundings were called for day. It was these people, numbering in the thousands, that led the Armenian nation into independence in 1918 after numerous rebellions and resistances in the national movement. The massacres that devastated the Armenian people had taken more than 80,000 to 300,000 people. Their blood was on the hands of the Ottoman Sultan Abdul Hamid II, who was later internationally condemned by foreign governments and humanitarian organizations when news of the horrors spread. At the end, over 50,000 children were orphaned. Although the story of these specific women holding rifles may be lost to time forever, they will always remind us of the Armenian people and the plight they faced long ago. Hannah Stili Gabi, born in 1746, was the earliest born person ever documented on a photo. Throughout history, we have read so many stories about fascinating people and events by text. However, it was rare that a photograph was ever shown in class. How did people look back then, and what did they wear? It was so difficult to ever put a face to a piece of writing detailing all the crazy events that went down. From the greatest wars to the worst of plagues and political turmoil. That was until one black and white photo surfaced from the many, showing an older woman with an unsmiling expression. Her eyes stared strikingly into the camera while the rest of her body and hair were completely covered in a dress. A name was finally put to her face. Hannah Stili Gabi was apparently the earliest born person to have ever been photographed. That means she would have been living at the apex of some of history's most notable events and figures. She was born in 1746, the year Bonnie Prince Charlie's dreams were ruined at the Battle of Culloden. At 10 years old, she was living when Mozart was just born. During her life, she was caught up in the American Revolution and was an adult when King Louis and Marie Antoinette's heads were chopped by the guillotine during the French Revolutions. Around that time, the brilliant mathematician Euler was up and coming, The age of sail had ended, and the age of steam began, and she possibly could have ridden one of the earliest versions of the bicycle. But the cherry on the top was the honor of having been the earliest born woman ever photographed. However, with old vintage artifacts, both rare and special, there's a lot that's unsure and questionable about so-called facts. It is known that this daguerreotype photo, and that she married a man named Joseph Gobe in 1770 in Wilmington, Delaware, in the Holy Trinity Old Swedes Church. What is not known, though, is whether Hannah's birth and death years are truly real. They were never documented directly, so it's unverifiable if her photograph really is the earliest. For instance, there's no trace of her in the federal census or her passing date, and there was never any record found of her burial. The evidence is too few and credibility may be stretched too far for people to be certain of her status. It's more likely that Massachusetts shoemaker John Adams was the earliest person photographed. Even though nothing is certain about Hannah Still Gorby and her mysterious photo, the fascination around the era she was born, as well as what she was possibly thinking in the moment her existence was captured, will forever leave audiences in awe. An aerial view of the flowers left outside Buckingham Palace after the passing of Princess Diana. In 1997, a piece of news left Great Britain in shock and overwhelming mourning. Princess Diana had passed away in a fatal car crash in the middle of the night. As a beloved member of the British royal family, she was the first wife of Prince Charles, who was the heir apparent to the British throne, and the mother of Prince William and Prince Harry. During the car crash, she was not pronounced deceased at the scene. Instead, she was rushed to the hospital where doctors operated on her for 2 hours and failed to get her heart beating regularly again. She later passed away from internal bleeding. The very first mourners went to Kensington Palace almost as soon as they heard of the tragedy before the break of dawn. Soon news of the fatal accident swept Great Britain. People wept with sadness and raw emotion, deciding to pay tribute. Many began to wait in line for more than 12 hours to sign books of condolence. The greatest display of mourning was perhaps the flowers. According to officials, 10 to 15 tons of bouquets and over 60 million flowers were left for Diana's memory and honor all around London. Between the many bouquets were flags, photographs, stuffed animals, candles, and even personal notes. It was the only way for people to feel like their mourning left a mark and represented their love for the princess. The display of flowers stayed for over a week and grew as time went on. There were so many that on the day of Princess Diana's funeral, the hearse used its wipers to wipe off the flowers and stems that were thrown as it carried Diana to her final resting place. At one point, they even had to pull over. In the end, volunteers started cleaning up the blooms that were decaying, while other fresh flowers were delivered to the hospitals and to nursing homes. Children in need were able to receive the toys left in tribute as donations. But what do you make of these fascinating historical photographs? To learn, adapt, overcome, and discover is a key aspect of our human nature. Without the desire to learn new things, mankind would hardly have progressed from our primitive stages. Though our modern-day triumphs and findings are much more random in subject and not quite so survival-orientated, they remain important and intriguing nonetheless. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 recent discoveries. What happened to the missing Iraq cash? 2004 saw $12 billion go missing on their way to Iraq in the midst of a war. Whilst these huge funds were earmarked for the reconstruction and rebuilding of the country post-war, this cash failed to have the beneficial impact that had been hoped. This enormous transfer of cash, weighing 363 tons in total, was delivered from New York, USA to Baghdad, Iraq. The plan was for this money to support the redevelopment of Iraq after the turbulent war years by dividing these funds amongst Iraqi ministries and U.S. contractors. This support plan was implemented in installments, with these cash deliveries being made once, sometimes even twice each month. The largest payment, $2,401,600,000, left the U.S. aboard AC-130 plane on June 22, 2004. This money was passed along as shrink-wrapped $100 bills, resulting in a whopping 281 million notes being handed over in one sum. With numbers of such a high scale, it should come as no surprise to discover that this is the largest cash transfer to have been completed in the entirety of the Federal Reserve's history, only to be spread and shared with no control over who got their hands on this money, nor how it was being used. In preparation for the House committee meeting, a government group established in order to oversee the reform and to assess the success of the reconstruction of Iraq, a memorandum, or in layman's terms an official record, was gathered, providing the details of the June 22 shipment. One official House committee chairman, Henry Waxman, commented, "The numbers are so large that it doesn't seem possible that they're true. Who, in their right mind, would send 363 tons of cash into a war zone?" Despite presenting an entirely convincing argument in the above statement, the strongly against war and military action attitude of Waxman results in criticism from many that his personal beliefs tainted his perceptions. Within this description and explanation of the shipment, a haphazard and frankly careless attitude was revealed to have been taken towards this life-changing amount of cash. According to the memorandum, the U.S.-led Coalition Provisional Authority pulled this money from Iraqi oil sales, funds for the United Nations Oil for Food Scheme, and seized Iraqi assets. A defining characteristic embodying the careless attitude was the key to the vault being held within a backpack that was entirely unsecured. So what actually happened with this money? $774,300 were found to have been stolen from one area's vault, made easy by the seemingly limited security that had been implemented. Piece by piece and between divisions, the lackluster attempt to protect this money proved to fail. It is estimated by the Specialist Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction, Stuart Bowen, that $8.8 billion intended for use within Iraqi ministries had not been used there, with Bowen stating they were without assurance the monies were properly used or accounted for. Deepening this concern is the belief among many officials such as Bowen that the amount that has been determined to have been lost, poorly distributed, or simply missing is not extensive. Many suggest now that the true value may be closer to $20 billion. Another point of blame is the failure to comply with certain terms expressed within the contract. The CPA had agreed to hire an independent certified public accounting firm to oversee the expenditure and to generally have another institution with their eyes on this grand quantity of money. This did not happen. Instead of a larger established firm, the CPA employed an unheard of consulting firm. Northstar Consultants Incorporated was such a small business that, according to Bowen, it operates out of a private home in San Diego. Needless to say, this did not comply with the terms within the contract that secured this money being transferred. On the contrary, the House committee highlighted that since the money had not been from the pocket of U.S. taxpayers, then they had less of a motive and were less concerned about this scenario than one may have anticipated. This drastic misplacement of billions of dollars resulted in millions of Iraqi families with no access to salaries or pensions for months upon months. Whilst we cannot know what happened to this money for certain, the suggestions made and the opinions we form may be our only conclusion. Scientists find the source of mysterious pulses being blasted towards Earth. Since 2014, scientists have pondered the odd and unexplained gamma rays that we have been receiving here on Earth, with them being repeatedly blasted in our direction. However, scientists have found the spot these gamma rays have been coming from. These gamma-ray pulses that we have been receiving here on Earth have been for years a topic of great scientific research, with astronomers finally tracking this previously unexplained occurrence down to a celestial body referred to as PSR J20395617. To those of us who are not quite up to date with celestial objects, PSR J20395617 is a neutron star, spinning rapidly on its axis. A neutron star is typically very small, with a radius nearing, though usually not exceeding, 30 kilometers. These neutron stars also hold an incredibly high density made of neutrons in close proximity to one another. Our current scientific understanding of neutron stars is that they are formed after the gravitational collapse of the supernova when a black hole is not made due to the smaller size of the object. While some of the initial hypotheses as to what this object firing gamma rays is did include a neutron star, orbiting quickly found another star. Other possibilities have also been in discussion. Furthermore, until now there was no proof, never mind substantial concrete evidence, that this was indeed the case. Scientists have now definitively concluded that the neutron star that has been firing gamma pulses is part of a binary system, meaning that this neutron star is gravitationally bound to one other star. In this instance, PSR J20395617 orbits a star that is an estimated 1/6 the size of the Sun within our own solar system. This orbital pattern, combined with the 377 rotations per second, has been concluded to force a gradual, steady evaporation of the neutron star. This evaporation seems to have released gamma rays that have been detected through the space telescopes we have put into space from Earth. Whilst this phenomenon had sparked interest worldwide, the research team was led by a group of scientists working at the University of Manchester. One of the largest aids in this research, however, was the crucial involvement of the Einstein at Home program. This was a volunteered study where researchers were given access to the computer power of PCs that had been volunteered for usage. In its essence, this means that researchers, if the computer were not in use, could gain extra power. This project was aided by thousands of civilians who may not have possibly comprehended what they were helping to complete. With one computer, this data analysis would have taken over 500 years. The aid from people's homes allowed the same results to be conducted in only 2 months. The community spirit truly is tangible. As we close the book on a scientific mystery that has been puzzling astronomers since 2014, new species of whale identified in the Gulf of Mexico. 2019 saw the startling discovery of a new species of whale, specifically a newly found baleen whale species within the Gulf of Mexico. Despite its ever-so-recent discovery, this creature has already made the endangered list. Dubbed Rice's whale, this animal can reach a staggering 42 feet in length, residing in the Gulf for the entire duration of the year. Consistently with the other baleen whale species, Rice's whales can weigh 60,000 pounds, that is 30 tons, and have 3 lateral ridges upon the jaw. Up until recently, Rice's whale had been grouped alongside Bride's whale, though new studies have found crucial morphological differences between the skulls of these two whale species, as well as the genetic makeup being noticeably incongruent. So soon after their discovery, Rice's whales have been added to the United States Endangered Species Act as well as the Marine Mammal Protection Act, aiming to preserve the lives of the few Rice's whales remaining. Current estimates suggest there are less than 100 of these mammals in the wild. According to the National Oceanic and Atmosphere Administration, Rice's whales are most vulnerable and most likely to endure more harm through vessel strikes, ocean noise, energy exploration, development and production, oil spills and responses, entanglements in fishing gear and ocean debris. The near extinction of so many majestic, beautiful animals and wildlife is one of the 21st century's worst ongoing issues, and it's a battle we must continue to solve. But what do you make of these recent discoveries? The jungles and the forests around us hide many secrets, most notably animals, cryptids, legends, and monsters concealed from the prying eyes of us humans. The sweeping jungle canopy presents the perfect disguise for many life forms to remain entirely undetected, though some reveal themselves enough to land on researchers' radars. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 mysterious jungle and forest discoveries. Rock apes encountered during the Vietnam War. Wars generally subject the public to many horrors, unthinkable and dangerous terrors. Though one potentially unforeseen problem and fear of the Vietnam War were the alleged rock apes, a flightly cryptid hiding within the jungles. These rock apes, or rather, Bat Thursday Tat when translated into Vietnamese, have been recorded plenty of times. Most notably witnessed throughout the Vietnam War, and yet we rarely hear of them, at least not when we draw comparison with our beloved Scottish Nessie or the Himalayan Yeti, who've been the focus of cryptid conversations now for centuries. Dubbed Monkey Mountain, one particular spot, a hill in Vietnam, appears to have attracted the eagle-eyed, curious individuals who witnessed these creatures throughout the duration of the war, or encounter these strange animals. Though, despite tourists being well-equipped ever since, and soldiers having been keeping a keen eye out, we're yet to receive photographic confirmation of their existence. Perhaps just as puzzling, we've never found bodies or corpses of the creature, yet there's little discrepancy between the descriptions given. This calls for some more research into this truly unusual phenomenon. The name rock apes was coined due to the reputation quickly built that when soldiers would throw rocks at these creatures, they would throw them back. Perhaps more terrifyingly, the same was true of wartime grenades. Regarding their appearance physically, these creatures are described as a staggering 6 foot tall, with a strong build and understandably an intimidating threat to humans. And hair ranging from brown to reddish-brown in color, the rock apes hold a distinctive appearance to someone who knows what, or who, they are looking for. Those who have been fortunate, or you might argue unfortunate, enough to encounter these creatures have reported seeing more than one, leading many to believe the rock apes had a preference to live in groups and stay localized entirely to the jungle, living in relative peace away from human civilization, at least until the breakout of the Vietnam War. A rather alarming and concerning trait here is these creatures do not appear to fear humans, being seen so many times within such close proximity to the wartime events. Following the descriptions that began to flood in resembling the one above, the vast majority of reports were dismissed, with the plausible explanation being presented that perhaps wartime horrors had a devastating impact upon soldiers' cognitive abilities, and their minds were simply giving an exaggerated hyperbolic description of an orangutan, or more accurately, a group of them. Whilst this certainly sounds more logical than the far more thrilling cryptid explanation, Vietnam's orangutan population has been extinct for centuries upon centuries, limiting this as an explanation. Further holes in the explanation are the behavioral characteristics describing these rock apes as highly social, despite the classic solo style we often see with orangutans. Another attempt to explain away these speculations, aiming to put the science in the theory, is the idea that these rock apes were simply northern white-cheeked gibbons. These gibbons, native to Vietnam and social monkeys, might pose a more accurate guess, though the size is decidedly inaccurate, with the standard 3-foot gibbon not being comparable to the 6-foot rock ape. In 1970, Professor Vo Su of Vietnam National University conducted an unsuccessful experiment. Further, a different research was conducted in 1974 when a mission aiming to capture a rock ape, or at least stumble upon sufficient, hard, indisputable evidence of its existence. This was a completely unsuccessful expedition. The crew returned with no new information or sightings of the rock apes. A perhaps less exciting explanation is that the rock ape sightings may have been influenced by the medication many soldiers used throughout the wartime. Without definitive, falsifiable evidence of this creature, we cannot confirm that we've unveiled a new species, though current research does indicate as much. We don't know much about these creatures housed in our jungles, but we hope our research, as well as current and future discoveries, will continue to teach us about our world. El Tunch. The legend of the Tunch has haunted generations of Peruvian families. Originally presented as a guardian and protector of the forest, the evolution of this legend has resulted in fear, as it grew into a symbol of loss of life. El Tunch will be a familiar name to many who grew up in Peru, often taking one of two forms in the legends told. Trapped walking in their same steps over and over. You would know of these spirits' presence through a long muffled sound. All that is required if you were ever to encounter one is to leave their path uninterrupted, move out of their way and remain respectful. Never speak ill of them. If these rules are adhered to, then you would never encounter any harm. If you fail to do so with these first spirits, they may visit you in your dreams, haunting for the lack of respect. The second legendary tale has been popularized and been portrayed as demonic and fearsome over the years, representing a sinister intent, despite initial legends detailing a spirit sent to protect our forests and jungles. Characterized by a short and persistent whistle announcing his presence, this Tunch required respect of himself, his signature sound and the forests. The Tunch is described as a violent and cruel man, and therefore a soul unable to ever find peace. Unlike the relatively harmless counterpart, this interpretation of the legend has had many disappear or pass away, having mimicked, imitated, or poked fun at this spirit. Few who have encountered it have survived, though those who have often find the faces of their friends and family unrecognizable and meaningless. The feelings described by those who have experienced his presence are ones of dread. The fear invoked through just this whistle is a terrifying feat in itself, for everyone knows not to make it themselves. Many avoid wandering into the depths of the forest out of respect, fear, and safety, taking these precautions in order to avoid becoming part of this folklore. So, as the years have progressed, why has its image become quite so evil? Some point fingers to the pop culture focus on horror, demonizing, and making these cultural legends mainstream sources of entertainment. Others suggest that the need to care for and guard art forests have increased, with a surge in deforestation and a general lack of respect for nature. Craterochirodon, the Triassic mystery creature. Today dinosaurs play a huge role in the planet's history, but by the Triassic era they were old news. The stars of the show were the rather bizarre, unexplained creatures who have let hide in the shadows of dinosaurs for centuries. One of these creatures is the Craterochirodon. To this day, we don't have the understanding to what the Craterochirodon exactly is, with fossil structures posing more questions than we can answer. The last two teeth we know of do tell us that there's a strange happening in the evolutionary cycle in the late Triassic of Arizona. The tale behind these teeth takes us back to only 1946, upon the discovery of one of these curved teeth by geologist G. E. Hazen, when it was passed along to a paleontologist, Edwin Colbert. Was little to say until the discovery of the second tooth, with a striking resemblance to the first. Colbert became invested in this case once again, though was unaware of any group these teeth could belong to. Through the remainder of his life until 2001, Colbert kept these teeth as a focus of his studies. Some progress was seen in 1995 with the publication of a research paper in which suggested these teeth were those of proto-mammals. This was largely dismissed due to the lack of research supporting this analysis. Shortly after, a disappointing revelation confirmed that the first tooth found was merely a cast, with no indication as to the location of the original. With only one genuine specimen to work with, research would become more difficult. Nonetheless, definitive conclusions have been drawn that we in fact have a tooth fossil, evidence through the enamel and root. Beyond this, however, is largely speculation. Placing these teeth with an animal is proving to be more of a complex task than anticipated. The only suggestion being that it belonged to a Craterochirodon, based off the size of the teeth. This is an umbrella term, encompassing the groups of mammals and reptiles. With only an indicator of size being provided by these teeth, we can't really draw many conclusions. Though fortunately it's most probable that a creature of this size will have been fossilized in one way or another. There are plenty of creatures that have walked this earth through our jungles before us, in the present, and who will continue to thrive into the next generation of humans. So what do you make of these mysterious jungle and forest discoveries? Special forces are a mysterious and elite segment of any military, one that consists of the best specimens of the human race of each country. They perform military tasks that others can only dream of and are both frightening and awe-inspiring in their capabilities. One of the most dangerous of these special forces are the commando forces, generally designed as military designations for elite, specialized assault on high-value targets. These groups operate in incredibly perilous situations. While other special forces teams might operate in relatively secret and unconventional warfare methods from a distance, commando units are used for blatant combat on the front lines of battle to carry out special operations missions. The individuals that are part of these forces must be strong, unforgiving, and unflinching. So today we'll be taking a look at three of the toughest special commando forces. Marcos, India. The Marine Commando Force, colloquially referred to as Marcos, is the Special Forces unit of the Indian Navy. It was founded in 1987 and has grown to be an incredibly experienced operation renowned for their professionalism, whose members are capable of performing missions under even the most adverse conditions. Originally created as a maritime mission group for reconnaissance and counterterrorism, into a highly trained Marine Commando Force whose abilities are seemingly limitless. Although their actions are generally highly classified, their confirmed activities are incredibly impressive. In 1987, as part of Operation Powan, the team captured Jaffna and Trincomalee harbors by swimming over 7 miles with explosives in tow, rigging the harbor undetected, detonating the explosives to destroy the harbor while under gunfire, and then swimming back to safety with no men lost. The following year, they trailed a seized vessel boarded by mercenaries involved in an attempted coup by Sri Lanka for 2 days before they were able to board the ship and force their surrender, arresting the militants. They have also taken the lives and arrested militants in counterinsurgency operations through Operation Rakshak, in which they eliminated a heavily established militant base and deeply protected by mountains in only a few weeks, disguising themselves as locals and participating in intense fights and insurgency operations. In 2018, they abducted the Dubai princess, Sheikh Latifah, for the United Arab Emirates and have an impressive track record of eliminating pirates through concentrated surveillance and attack methods. Such a rigorous team is obviously made up of only the most promising individuals, and these are generally hand-selected in the early 20s from the Indian Navy. Once they are selected, they must undergo a harrowing training process and then further selections. Only those who are the best of the best are even considered for Special Forces training, and out of those elite individuals, only a handful make it through to becoming a fully fledged Marcos member. The initial physical fitness and aptitude test alone takes 3 days, and only 20% of those who complete it move on to the next round. This remaining 20% is then subjected to what is called Hell's Week, which consists of 7 days of intense physical activity and sleep deprivation. Of those who entered the first round of Marcos testing, only 2% make it through Hell's Week. However, those who do are rewarded for surviving such a grueling ordeal by being trained in one of the most elite special forces in the world. Individuals are trained in airborne operations, combat diving courses, counterterrorism, anti-piracy operations, direct action, infiltration and exfiltration tactics, special reconnaissance, and unconventional warfare. And this is just the initial stages of the rigorous process. Later training is undertaken at various agencies within the Indian Navy, such as the Junior Leaders Commando Training Camp and the Purvat Gatak School for high-altitude mountain climbing. Additionally, all members are freefall qualified. Truly, there is nothing that these commandos cannot do, and this reputation is reflected in their track record. Russian Special Forces and the Alpha Group. Russia is known for its secrecy when it comes to military and governmental affairs, and Spetsgruppe A, or the Alpha Group, might be one of the most covert and secretive branches of the Russian military. Although its primary purpose remains a mystery, it is speculated that they operate under the direct command of the top Russian leaders. The Alpha Group's participation has been confirmed in everything sophisticated police duties to covert international operations, and conjecture has expanded its talents even further. Founded in 1974 by the KGB as a response to the Munich attack at the Munich Summer Olympics, this branch is its own subset of Russia's highly trained Special Forces unit and is officially intended to provide more sophisticated domestic protection against attacks and other forms of unconventional warfare. Although the true purpose is more mysterious. Originally, this protection was specifically directed towards the top members of the Soviet Union, and smaller, localized units of the Alpha Group began being placed at key points throughout the large country. The motives and methods of the Alpha Group are notoriously mysterious and generally seem to be directed towards counterterrorism goals. In 1979, they famously ended the life of Ukrainian Yuri Vlasenko while he was sheltered in the consular section of the Embassy of the United States in Moscow, pleading asylum from the United States. Their ruthless methods have been deployed in multiple hostage situations, many of which involved Soviet army deserters taking over entire buildings. In one noteworthy raid, they stormed a seized airplane and captured 3 of the hijackers, ending the life of 3 others along with 5 hostages. Their more clandestine operations as part of the Soviet Union generally operated around and domestic espionage, but soon expanded into foreign operations as their scope and practice grew beyond their original missions. They began operating in Afghanistan and launched an intervention on the country in 1979 that resulted in the seizing of several important government buildings and taking the life of President Hafizullah Amin and his mistress and child. They achieved this coup by assuming the disguise of Afghan military personnel tasked with guarding the palace, and then promptly took the life of every witness of the 34-minute raid, losing only 2 of their own in the entire mission. What followed was the 10-year Soviet-Afghan War, in which the Alpha Group's relentless methods were heavily employed. Their sometimes ruthful methods were employed ruthlessly to try to maintain Soviet dominance by any means necessary. After the eventual dissolution of the Soviet Union, Alpha Group was shuffled around and until it was reformed under the current government. Veterans of the former, more sinister branches of the Alpha Group became involved in business, organized crime, and politics, while the current members remain a mysterious, albeit powerful branch of the Russian Special Forces Division. The Special Services Group in Pakistan, Black Storks. The Special Services Group, also known as SSG, nicknamed the Black Storks or the Maroon Berets because of their unique headgear, is a highly classified special services branch of Pakistan's military. The group was created in 1956 and trained based off the U.S. Special Forces tactics employed throughout the Cold War, later incorporating methods employed in Chinese training and weaponry. Each unit originally specialized in a terrain such as desert, mountain, ranger, or underwater warfare, and the scuba unit was widely recognized for its incredible toughness and fearlessness, even in the most dangerous situations. Their first mission was part of the Indo-Pakistan War of 1965, and they were deployed as part of a commando mission to destroy Indian airships and bases. Although the mission was poorly planned and ill-timed, resulting in most of the SSG being captured and unable to return to Pakistan, they still managed to carry out their mission, and the battalion only grew in strength and training following the endeavor. In the Soviet-Afghan War, a battle between the Russians and the Mashiyin in a valley along the Pakistan border resulted in the Soviets losing only 6 of their paratroopers, while the Pakistanis lost over 200 men. The SSG commando force joined the remaining Mashiyin and did battle with the Russians for almost an entire month, after which not a single Russian left the valley alive. While battling with India, the SSG infiltrated the eastern border by pretending to be sheep herders and successfully penetrated deep into India during the snowy season, in which the Indian posts were more lightly manned. Upon discovery, a full-fledged war broke out and the SSG suffered many casualties, although their commando training many damages. Their exact activities are highly classified, and their commando methods ensure that nobody knows exactly how extensively they are involved in the government and military operations of the country. As the future of war evolved following the Second World War, so did the uses for and methods of the military, necessitating the creation of National Special Forces units to adapt to these new commando methods and to perform missions to protect their countries. These units are legendary in their secrecy and strength, and these are just a few examples of the toughest special commando forces to exist. But what do you make of these tough special commando forces? The infamous Roswell event happened back in July 1947. The story details that a large craft made contact with the ground near Roswell, New Mexico. W. Mac Brazil, a rancher near Roswell, New Mexico, found wreckage in 1947. Because there had been so many other flying saucer sightings that same year, Brazil believed this wreckage had to be something similar. Major Jesse Marcel was sent to investigate the site and recover the wreckage. He announced in a press release that they'd recovered a flying disc, but the next day they said it was only a weather balloon. However, later on the Air Force claimed that neither stories were true and that it was actually a device used to spy on the Soviet Union. Strangely, after going back on their statements, people quickly forgot about the incident. Even though a matter of days prior, their government admitted they had discovered the wreck of a flying disc. However, when more information was released about the wreckage, and when those who were at the site started to talk about some of the things they'd seen, new interests started developing. UFO researchers said that Roswell is one of the most important events in regards to ufology, and they are surprised that people haven't pushed this more and demanded about what came down that day. Amateur researchers have said that these military officials are not stupid, and that they know the difference between a UFO and a weather balloon. It's reported that when the initial news broke that it was a UFO that was discovered, people started to panic, and this was the main reason why the military went back on their words. For the last few decades, though, those who worked at the location of the crash and who were told inside information came forward with their stories. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy was a senior master sergeant in the Women's Air Force. Documents show that she had an incredible encounter with a humanoid. She claims this individual went by the name of Errol, and they told her where they'd come from and why they were visiting planet Earth. At the time of this encounter, Matilda was only 23 years old. She claims she was able to communicate with the humanoid through telepathy. This Errol, who Matilda was in contact with and who she was interviewed by, said there was notable differences between her and this being. Firstly, she stated that Errol was not a biological entity like herself, but said that she did have a female appearance and that she was the size of a child. During the crash, there was 3 of them on board and she was the only survivor. Interestingly, Matilda's report matches what many abductees have said. She claims that the being's body wasn't like a human's, but rather seemed to be made of some type of synthetic material. Those who have looked into UFO abductions have said these alleged aliens do come across as robotic, and it's caused some to say they're similar to working robots. Some abductees have said that while observing these beings, they were very robot-like, not blinking, moving in bizarre ways, and not showing any type of emotion. When Matilda was later interviewed for a book, she theorized that the craft was made out of the same material as the alien, and that both of them could be controlled by the mind. She did say, however, that Ariel didn't release much information to her, and that she was reserved about certain topics. Matilda even went as far as saying that it came across that Ariel didn't trust the military officials. The nurse then took this as a warning, and thought that if aliens didn't trust humans, it doesn't reflect well on us as a species. When questioned about where they came from, Errol claims that her civilization is an ancient one that's very powerful, and that their end goal is to progress. McCarroll penned a letter which reads as follows. Mankind needs to know the answers to questions which are contained in these documents. Who are we? Where do we come from? What is our purpose on Earth? If there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, why have they not made contact? It's vital that people understand the devastating consequences to our physical and spiritual survival if we fail to take effective action to undo the long-standing and pervasive effects of alien intervention on Earth. Interestingly, this story links up with an account which came from a mortician named Glenn Dennis. According to Dennis, who was a nurse at the Roswell Army Airfield, she said she witnessed doctors examining creatures that resembled humans, but had long, thin arms and very large bald heads. Dennis reported that there were requests for child-sized caskets around the same time. The TV show UFO Hunters interviewed Elle Fulford, who was at the site and helped clean up the crash, and also at the time one of the last surviving people who was actually at the crash site. Elle said the material they picked up was lightweight, and when they screwed it up, it was able to return to its original form. The UFO Hunters team laid out several materials, some of which included everyday foil and also Marla foil. However, when Earl picked this up, he said it didn't match what he picked up at the crash site, and went on to note it was too heavy. He said the material he picked up at the site was pretty much weightless, and that no matter how much he tried to tear it up or scrunch it up, it would always return to its original shape, saying that he'd never felt a material like it before. The team, with Earl's knowledge, managed to recreate a material based on what he described. And when he picked it up, he described it as being a close match. He said the following when he picked up the material. This one feels more like the material. We could squeeze it and it would pop back. The thickness and weight is similar. It makes chills run down my back. End quote. As of today, many believe there's many things we aren't being told about the Roswell incident. So what do you think happened at Roswell? And what do you make of Matilda's statements? U.S. officials have just announced that hackers tried to poison the water system in Florida. They reported that computer hacker gained access to the water system and attempted to pump it full of a dangerous amount of chemicals. U.S. officials said the hacker was successful to an extent as they managed to increase the amount of sodium hydroxide in the treatment system. However, workers quickly noticed the change and reversed it. Those who work in water treatment said that lye is used in small amounts to control acidity, but putting a large amount could have major consequences. Old South Mayor Eric Seidel said the following, "There's a bad actor out there. As of right now, those investigating the case have said no arrests had been made, and that it's not even known if this was done by someone within the United States. The hacker was able to do what they did by hacking into the water treatment system. An operator who was working that day didn't initially realize what was going on and thought it was their supervisor who'd made the changes. But once the hacker got into the system again in the afternoon, alarm bells started going off. It's reported by investigators that the treatment software increased the sodium hydroxide content from 100 parts per million to 11,100 parts per million. Noticing that this could be very dangerous, the operator immediately reduced the level to normal. Residents, though, were left questioning how an individual would be able to do this, and what stops them from doing it again at a different location. They now know they can hack into the water system, so who's to say they won't do something worse? County Sheriff Bob Gelateri said the following, "And that's if you put that amount of substance into the drinking water, it's not a good thing." At no time was there a significant adverse effect on the water being treated. Importantly, the public was never in danger. What's worrying is that security experts have been warning about these kinds of attacks for years. Daniel Zaffer, manager of analysis at Mandiant Threat Intelligence, said the following. Since last year, Mandiant Threat Intelligence has observed an increase in cyber incidents by novice hackers seeking to access and learn about remotely accessible industrial systems. Many of the victims appear to have been selected arbitrarily, such as small critical infrastructure asset owners and operators who serve small populations. Through remote interactions with these systems, actors have engaged in limited impact operations. But none of these cases has resulted in damage to people or infrastructure. Fortunately, industrial processes are often designed and monitored by professional engineers who incorporate safety mechanisms to prevent unexpected modifications. We believe that the increasing interest in industrial control systems by actors of this nature is the result of the increased availability of tools and resources that reduce the barrier to learn about and interact with these systems. End quote. Over the years, people have discovered strange things coming out of their taps in their homes. The most recent one came in the form of purple water. This happened to residents in Ohio. They said that when they turned on their taps, pink water came out. Incredibly, this affected all households and businesses in the region, with many wanting an answer for what this strange substance was. For a short time, it was a complete mystery, and no one had any idea as to what was causing it. However, after a short investigation, it turned out the color was due to a problem at the water treatment plant. It was reported that large quantities of sodium permanganate leaked into the plant, causing the water to turn this color. The chemical was used to improve the smell and taste of the water. However, what many had concerns with is when they were told it was safe to drink. As you can imagine, not everyone felt entirely comfortable with this, and many compared it to the time drinking water turned black. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Going back a few years ago, officials said that residents in Texas should not be alarmed as the black water is safe to drink, but many residents were angry, as they didn't feel like it was safe. It was soon reported by many that the black water came out of taps in bathtubs, sinks, and was even going into their washing machines. However, water officials did say there is nothing wrong with the water. They said the black color comes from having too much iron in it, and even encouraged people to drink it. Photographs and stories soon started to be shared on social media, with people nodding disgusted that they were told this was okay to drink. One person said they'll drink it once they see a government official drink it. The majority of people went buying that this water was safe to drink. The black water had been an issue for residents for over a week. Some residents were so frustrated that they started to post videos online, saying that they wanted answers for what's been like this for so long. I've said they had no choice and had to wash and drink the water. One resident said the following: "How can they expect people to drink this stuff? It looks horrible. Never have I seen black water, and never have I heard people drinking black water. This isn't right." End quote. One homeowner scooped up some of the leftover water onto her finger and showed what looked to be a dark brown substance. The resident collected some of the brown water in her jar, explaining that it was not right for the city to expect people to come home and see black water coming out of their tams, and not only that, but also expecting them to drink and wash in it. So my question is, what do you make of these stories? And if this happened to you and you saw black water coming out of your tams, would you drink it?